Hi, Jill.
Hi, Janice.
Nice to see you on the deep dive.
Thanks so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Great. Well, let's go ahead and dive in. So many people around the world do speak English, even if it's not their first language. Why not just use English in surveys?
It's a great question, and we get that a lot. There is a difference between speaking a language and really knowing a language. And so a lot of people use English in out in the world, maybe at work, maybe not, maybe with their families, but it's not their language. It's not the language that they're comfortable expressing nuance. And when we think about surveys, we really want to understand experience. That's the goal of this whole industry that we're in, understanding people's authentic experience. And so if we want to do that, the best way to do that is by interacting with people in the language that they're most comfortable in. Many people are multilingual, and so they might use multiple languages in different contexts, but by translating, we're really able to get at subtleties that even relatively fluent speakers might not be able to respond to. I mean, think about the difference between crispy and crunchy. If you're trying to understand and get at somebody's understanding of something so subtle, even in English, as English speakers, it's hard to differentiate between the two, but imagine putting that in front of somebody whose language isn't English and asking them to understand at that level. It just puts too much demand on them, and it runs the risk of coming up short on meaningful insights.
Sure, and at the end of the day, crispy and crunchy mean two different things to marketers.
They certainly do.
As researchers, we want to make sure we're mindful of that, I'm sure.
Right, absolutely.
That's a great example. So translating surveys is only one side of the equation. What's next?
Yeah. Of course. So open ends is another area that is so important to think about. And so the survey could be translated really well, but what do we want to allow people to answer in the language that's natural to them? And in most cases, the answer is yes. So we don't want them to, to force them to answer in English. And so if they answer in another language, we want to be able to translate that back. But we also want to be able to detect what might be fraudulent responses.
Sure.
So if there's a way that we can clean up those responses long before we pay to have them translated, that's ideal. Right. So there are a lot of steps, and especially now with AI, that we can implement to clean up before we even go to the translation process. And the survey, the open-end translation doesn't have to be as nuanced necessarily as the outbound survey, but you still want to make sure that you're not just leaving it to chance or to machine translation or AI when you really want to understand what people are really trying to say and what they really mean. And I think that's a really important distinction, is what people say and what they mean are often two different things. And so you want to make sure that you have the resources to really understand that meaning.
That's a really great point. Oftentimes when you think about things and you see them written, are they intended in the way that they're written? Of course, you want to make sure you're translating that well.
Yep.
So you translate the language, but what else is there to translate?
Yeah, it's a great question. Language is more than just words, and culture is expressed in so many different ways. And so when we're doing demographics, for example, survey translation, it's more than just making sure it's dollars and euros or feet and meters. It's also the cultural context and what questions are culturally relevant to people. And so, is it education levels? Is it household makeup? So we talk about children under 18 living at home, and that's a frame of reference for us that makes sense. But in some countries around the world, 18 isn't the age of majority. Right. And so translating it as 18 isn't sufficient because that's not relevant to them as a category. So thinking about what age ranges are relevant, or thinking about the fact that internationally, multi-generational families are often the norm. And so maybe that's an important question. It's not about, do you have children under 18 living with you, but do you have adult children living with you? Do you have multiple generations living with you? That's some insight that could really be important in understanding the whole context. So localizing demographics is a great example of where it goes beyond just the words and beyond just translating, but zooming out and asking, are these the right questions to ask and the right frames of reference for people, so that it gives you the content that you need, but also feels natural to the reader, to the participant. Because the goal of translation is that it doesn't sound translated; it sounds like it's written for them. So if there's something really subtle, even for example in Canada they say grade 8, in US we say 8th grade, and so if you're taking a survey and you happen to see grade 8, you understand what it means, but it just kind of like, it just shocks you a little bit. You're like, wait, was this Is this for me? And
Right.
so those are the types of things that in some cases are going to get in the way, potentially get in the way of true meaning, but in other cases just might rub people the wrong way, like you said.
Sure. So you're really kind of ensuring that the survey is designed in such a way that it's, flawed survey data isn't the result of the survey.
Absolutely.
You're perfecting the survey
For sure.
ahead of time. Really interesting, and frankly, nice to know that there's someone that's expert in this area that's always layering in their expertise.
Absolutely.
So interestingly, obviously AI has come up a lot over the last few hours in the sessions, but what questions are people asking you about your use of AI in translation?
Yeah, so more and more all the time. And so what we're getting from clients these days oftentimes is, hey, can you clean up this AI translation that we did? And so we can clean it up, and we do that all the time. It's called post-editing. So it's machine translation post-editing, MTPE or AIPE. But the best output is when we're able to have an impact earlier on in the process. So if we can incorporate style guides, glossaries, fine-tune the engines, use engines that are designed or optimized for certain languages or for certain contexts beforehand, we're going to have better output, which then will be easier and more effective for our linguists to then go in and do that cleanup. And linguists, when in the translation world, we assign translators to projects based on native language, region, industry expertise, software expertise. There's so many different factors that we consider. And so it's not just, hey, you speak Spanish, can you translate this survey? There's so much more than that. And so similarly with all of the technology, it's not one size fits all for any of the work that we do. So let's make sure we have the right technology for the right application. We have the right people and doing that human in the loop process so that we're doing the best from the beginning. So then the human work at the end is optimized. And so, but all that said, we will still clean it up because sometimes clients want to own their own AI or they have it within their platform, and that's okay. So there's always the ideal of what, in an ideal world, all the different touch points that we'd like to have and all the ways that we'd like to optimize it. And then there's the reality of the situation that sometimes it's not possible. And so send us your AI and we'll clean it up.
Sure. But I love what you just said, human in the loop. That's such a great way of kind of saying that you wanted to, ideally you'd be injected into the process, or there would be a human injected into the process.
Yep. And not just, and I like the loop idea too, that it's not just at the end point, but at multiple touch points throughout. Making those decisions, AI is great at prediction, but humans are good at judgment. And so our judgment is necessary throughout so many steps in the process. And so honoring that and building it in. And then on a related point is that oftentimes clients then ask, well, why isn't it just cheaper if you're using AI? But if you think about all of the steps and all of the investment and all of the development and all of the humans that are still involved in managing that complexity for clients, it's not necessarily that much cheaper. It can be in certain ways, and it certainly can be faster, but it is it's complex in its own way. And so understanding all of the complexity, all those parts and pieces that a translation agency is in charge of to ensure that quality output, to again make sure that nothing's lost and that nuance where all of the really important insights are, that is still preserved.
That's really interesting. So you're essentially translating a different type of thing. You're translating technology, you're applying technology, so it's translation plus in many ways.
Exactly right. Many pluses.
I'd love to understand a little bit more about your global clients and what they're asking for. What are your global clients most interested in getting from you?
So some of them are just looking for translation. And so translation of outbound surveys, open ends. Sometimes they want translation of discussion guides, legal contracts, participant waivers. But translation aside, more and more are coming to us for bilingual moderation. They understand that having an English moderator with either doing an interview in English has its shortfalls, just like doing a survey only in English, and having an interpreter there makes it more of an artificial conversation. So to the extent possible, always having a bilingual moderator who understands the language and the culture, what's said, what's not said, or what's implied underneath the surface. So we're doing more and more bilingual moderation. They're asking for simultaneous interpretation, transcription of focus groups and interviews. And that's another area where AI certainly is speeding things up. But when you're going from one language to another, transcribing directly into English, so much can be lost. So again, you want to have the right engines, the right platforms, the right people reviewing and making sure that what that output is truly reflects what was intended. And the challenge with AI is it sounds so beautiful. In the old days when people were using Google Translate, which translation agencies still use that type of machine translation, it sounded more clunky, but it was often accurate. Now, AI translation sounds beautiful, so you think that it's perfect, but it just sounds fluent, and you don't notice that there might be things that are inaccurately translated, hallucinated, omitted. So that human is just, it makes all the difference. So when that nuance and accuracy matters, humans really matter.
And it's surprising how many jargony terms kind of wind up in surveys.
Absolutely.
And that type of thing as well. So,
yeah, and being on the lookout for that and really thinking about how to translate that, and sometimes going back to the client and saying, hey, there are a couple different ways of going with this. What do you think? Or give me a little bit more context around this. Something that will make a translator, sit up and say, you know what, I need a little more context. And whereas AI isn't asking for more context, they're just going to go with the best possible It's going to just go with the best possible response. So that interaction and that judgment is such an important part of it.
It's great. That's so interesting. So many things to think about.
Yeah.
I think that, oftentimes we oversimplify how complex it can be to work across multiple languages, multiple regions, geographies, and you've given us a lot to think about. So
great.
Thanks.
I'm so glad.
Wonderful. Well, it was great to talk to you.
Thank you. Great talking to you as well.
Thanks for diving in.
My pleasure. Thanks.